So, that was an experience and a half. Let me tell you about it.
That's weird.
What is it?
151,000 souls go into the great beyond every day, and I count every single one of them. The count's off.
Huh.
Soul tells the story of Joe Gardner, voiced by Jamie Foxx, a middle-aged music teacher who's longing for his piano career to take off. One day, he gets a gig from the Have-Note Club from a high-profile musician, but takes a dramatic turn where Joe falls down a manhole and practically dies. He ends up in the Great Before, where souls are given personalities by mentors so the former can go down to Earth to start their lives. Hilariously mistaken as a mentor, Joe ends up with 22, voiced by Tina Fey, a soul with a very nihilistic view of life, also making an interesting soul/Inside Out double feature in more ways than one. So Joe has to teach 22 about the meaning of life while also getting himself back to Earth in time for his big gig. When I first saw the trailers to this film, I pretty much had the film figured out based on what I watched. Even with the studio's films that I've loved, I had a feeling where the plot would go, but the good news was that even though I was right, the executions were so original and exciting that I just didn't care, because at the end of the day,
it doesn't matter! It just doesn't matter!
With a film like Coco, I knew Miguel would make up with his family, but the means by which he did so made for such a rewarding and profound experience. With the greater case for Soul, I honestly lost count at how many times it took different twists and turns that pulled the rug from under my feet. I was dumbfounded, but I was most importantly transfixed by its direction. All of that credit goes to how both director and co-writer Pete Docter and his co-writer and co-director Kemp brilliantly turned the tropes of the follow your dream story on their heads while retaining the Pixar formula of the buddy comedy. Speaking of which, if I had to pick my favorite, I would pick Docter within a heartbeat. Out of all of them, I think that he's accomplished a body of work that progressively gets better with each film. I'm consistently amazed how deeper and more personal Docter got with each film. With Soul, it's absolutely deserving of the Pixar name. More than any other film from this studio can I say that adults are going to find much more meaning and fulfillment with this one. Kids younger than 8 or 9 can enjoy the zany and fast comedy that unfolds, but the emotions, themes, and questions that the film shares and engages with really resonate on a more mature level. It's ultimately about coming to the conclusion that yes, you should definitely follow your dreams, but to also remember that your passion is not the end-all be-all of your life. Take myself for example. Cinephilia is my spark, but it's not the whole of my life. There are also my friends, family, partner, academic career, and beyond. My love for video games, swimming, drawing, and everything else that makes me a fuller person. That fresh take on a familiar narrative is something that inches Pixar even deeper into that status of a home of truly trailblazing storytellers. It's impressive for a film to incorporate that into a follow your dream story, but for a family film to accomplish that is a truly remarkable feat. At the same token, it balances all those complex musings with some terrific comedy. The scenes where 22 plays off all of the historical figures in the afterlife, I dare not spoil for how hilarious they are, always get a big laugh out of me. Foxx and Fey realize these characters because of that. There comes a point in the midsection where it threatens to get too silly, but looking back at where it all went and how it served the development of these characters and these ideas, I think that it works well enough to not make it too broad. It's needless to talk about the god-tier rendering of a Pixar film, but Soul still succeeds in something totally remarkable. Yes, the details in New York are eerily photorealistic, from the inanimate objects, the lighting, and everybody's hair, but it also brings animating people to a whole new level. Every character, major or minor, in the barbershop, classroom, music bar, and even in the streets, all look unique and memorable from each other and not feel like another character design copy and pasted in another position. When I first saw The Great Beyond and Great Before, my jaw slammed down to the floor. With these last few Pixar films beautifully presented at a 2:39:1 aspect ratio, Soul furthers the power of Pixar's presentation to the point where its shot composition and depth feel just as accomplished and immersive as any other live-action film with brilliant cinematography. Going back to the locales themselves, it's Pixar's most fully realized realm since Inside Out, perfectly balancing world building and storytelling just as well as that film did. Just like Inside Out, Soul isn't just a Pixar film where the photorealistic details are the star. It's also the idiosyncratic depiction of an abstract world, the latter being the afterlife. The Picasso-esque designs of Terry and the Jerrys vividly enhance the personality of the great before, a realm that feels both warmly inviting and immensely otherworldly. The score of the film was brilliant. Everyone gives a lot of credit to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross for their ethereal and ambient work in Soul, and rightfully so. With this and their score to David Fincher's Mank, 2020 really is a fine year for these two wonderful composers, but Reznor and Ross's work for Soul is just half of the score's excellence. The jazz compositions by Jon Batiste do an excellent job in conveying who Joe is as a character, as well as round out the film's musical identity. I'm gonna briefly delve into some spoilers, so if you just want to hear my final verdict, then you can just pause the video and then skip to this time code right here. There comes a point in Soul where Joe and 22 get back to Earth sooner than expected, but they end up in unexpected bodies to those that belong to a therapy cat and Joe's body respectively. For a good stretch of the film, even in its comedic sensibilities, it does rely much heavier on slapstick. This has created some racial and artistic controversies. With what I'm about to say as a mid-20s white college grad, take what I say for what it's worth, or lack thereof. In other words, with a grain of salt, but I digress. There eventually comes a point where Joe, inhabited by 22, meets up with Connie, Joe's student, at his place for music lessons. She finds it all completely pointless, and this goes into a conversation of all the inconveniences of life, education, etc, etc, etc. I do understand that for some, the film's take on the body swapping trope can be off-putting, but the direction where this goes feels totally earned, by making Joe relate to students on an equal if not empathetic level, rather than from his own elitist and inert one, makes such a brilliantly conveyed change of character. Once again, being that there's much more to life than just loving one thing, maybe just shooting the about what sucks in life brings us all closer together. It even gets better with the confrontation between Joe and his mother. Something that the film establishes is that when 22 is in Joe's body, the people hear Joe's voice, but we, the audience, hear 22's voice. When Joe as 22 talks to his mother about his passion in music, it goes into Joe's voice, as if we're hearing the words what Joe wanted to say, but 22 ultimately validates. This drives home all of the film's themes perfectly. Joe had to see a different side of himself, literally from a different being, which I guess you could say is Joe's most important out-of-body experience. As far as Pixar films go, I'd say it just makes it into my top 10 of favorites. That's not to say it's not as good as others, it's just that Pixar has made so many great films that ranking 10 is just not cutting it anymore. So I'd say it definitely ranks in my top 15. Bottom line is this: Soul does more than to push the boundaries of what Pixar can achieve as a studio of family films. It also validates the genre with imagination and maturity. So what'd y'all think of Soul? Sound off in the comments on your thoughts, like and subscribe, and ring the bell so you can tune in to my future videos. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at FilmGeekDave.
See you next time!